Morning, everyone. My name's Angela Sciberras. I'm a specialist kinesiologist and a few other things. I've been working in clinic for just shy of 20 years with clients, hundreds, possibly into the thousands, I would say now, of clients. Thousands definitely of client sessions, thousands of hours with people working through what it is to be a human being. And even though I'm sure I still haven't seen it all, I've seen a lot and seen the many and varied ways that people pull their lives together, the ways that their lives fall apart, the things that they associate with the things that traumatize them, and then therefore maybe hold them back from truly living a real life that they love. I have the beautiful Kirstene on this morning, and she's going to explain to us exactly how she got to the point she is now, as she's moving into something that's incredibly powerful called My Design. It's My Design, isn't it, Kirstene?
It is. And so a little bit of background to myself is I've been a client of Angie's for, I think, at least 8 years ago. I think I first came and saw you, and I was first introduced to this concept of kinesiology, or this modality of kinesiology, I should say. And I'll speak a little bit into that when we sort of unpack a bit of the impact of your sessions. But a bit of my background is I am a former teacher, former secondary teacher. I followed the very traditional route of society. I did well at school. I went straight to uni to study teaching, and then I found that I just wasn't really as lit up by teaching, or teaching in traditional aspects, as I always thought that I would be. I followed my own curiosities, and I started studying my graduate certificate in careers development. So I was really starting to challenge traditional education and wonder how we're actually preparing young people for success in their work and in their life. Because ultimately, isn't that what school's about? Not only developing young people intellectually, but personally as well. And I think we were really, at the time, I was going through my own personal development journey. I mean, still am. I don't think it ever stops. But I was starting to learn a lot about myself, a lot of fantastic tools. And I was challenging, why am I not teaching? Why are we not bringing that stuff into schools? So yes, I was studying, then I followed my own curiosities, and within that course was introduced to this concept of career design or life design, and the idea that we are all designers because we're all designing our lives. And I was hook, line, and sinkered, absolutely loved that concept. And then I will always say this is the most, I guess, universe magical moment I've had, or synchronicity, catalyst moment, whatever you want to coin it, is I had someone probably about 6 months later who at the time was actually really feeling challenged in my existing teaching role. And then I had someone out of the blue who I went to high school with, who I hadn't spoken to in years, message me, be like, I know this is really random, but I've just seen this job advertisement within this diocese of education I was working in, and I thought of you, and it was teacher of life design. And I was like, amazed. I didn't even know that there was such a thing, and like rightfully so, because the school I was at was the only school that was doing anything like it. The principal was very pioneering. I obviously went for the interview, got the job, and there was just an ease with my whole teaching position there. Doesn't mean it wasn't always easy, doesn't mean that there wasn't challenges, but there was an ease, there was a flow, which is a real signal that I was in alignment. And I guess for me, I just couldn't ignore the echo of whenever I told someone what I was teaching, what I was doing, every single person would be like gobsmacked. They'd be like, why don't all schools have this? I wish I had this when I was at school. So that really activated an entrepreneurial side of me, which was always there. I just didn't know it. Had tried it in a different couple of other different aspects, but really looked at what was the universe was signaling me towards, which was education and life design, and then infusing that with my entrepreneurial side to co-found what's now My Design, and we're an education provider that partners with schools, with teachers, with careers advisors to embed that self-discovery, career development, and ultimately life design into a student's timetable.
Oh my God, that is so exciting, particularly having known you now. I mean, has it been, I feel like it's been like 8 years or something like that.
At least, yeah,
That
it's
I've
been a
known you.
journey.
And as a kinesiologist and someone who works with people, it's so exciting, and it's what we live for, to see the journey unfold and to see people. Ultimately, we stand for removing the blocks and obstacles in the way of someone seeing the beauty of the genius that they have within themselves, and actually moving to the world, expressing that to actually leave legacy. So that's incredible for the legacy of the young people of today, which, not that I'm a young person and can speak on their behalf, that's for sure, but it seems to me from the outside that they really do need that help, because the world is such an oyster now. There's so much that can be done, and also so many challenges in the world where I feel they do need that extra support to help them design the life that would bring them the most joy. So it's exciting to see you do that.
Totally. And I think I wouldn't be so clear on these things if I hadn't done my own unblocking through like my work with you. And I think, and we spoke a little bit before this started about how sometimes I'm a big believer in our challenges or our frustrations can often feel like punishment and suffering at the time, but they like in hindsight, they're often the things that evoke such creativity, evoke innovation, evoke really our purpose. And I think back to when I first came to see you 8 years ago, I think a big challenge that I was experiencing was I was feeling like I wasn't fitting into a system that I was trying to comply with, a system that I felt like was really not going to allow me to design a life I loved. And I feel like I look back now and it makes sense that I was so conflicted and challenged by that, because ultimately a big part of my purpose is to help people design a life that lights them up. And then I even look back to my earlier years of teaching where it was frustrating at the time when I was first teaching at a trade school and I was having these 16, 17-year-old boys for the most part challenge and be like, why am I learning this? Like, this doesn't, like, I don't need to look at this text. Like, I'm here doing like my apprenticeship. Like, why am I doing it? And I couldn't disagree with what they were saying. And I'm so thankful now that they challenged me on those things, because then I started to challenge the system. And that's where the innovation and the opportunity came from. If I had a super compliant cohort, then I may not have been challenging education in the way that I am now. So I think there's a real, not to negate the frustration that and the challenge that does come in those situations, because it is hard, but there really is, when you look at it through the lens of this can be transmuted into something powerful and an opportunity, then the sky's the limit. So, and I know you've done that a lot with your work as well, which I've then had to, what's really beautiful is, you may have experienced some challenge or frustration within your space, and then that's led to your own creativity, which then I know I benefited from as a client. So I think that'd be a really great example to unpack there.
Really well said. And I think for those people who are still sitting on this presentation and thinking, I still don't know what kinesiology even is. I know I mentioned it at the very beginning. To shorten it to a very quick version of the explanation of what that is, basically we're just working with the nervous system. Chiropractors actually developed kinesiology, and some chiropractors still use kinesiology in their practices. Obviously, they would focus more on the structural side of the body, do a muscle test, decide which part of the structure needs to be adjusted, and also using the muscle test to double check whether that's actually appropriate, which I really love. That's how it developed originally. It was, I
never knew that. Wow.
Yeah, can I do this structural adjustment? And if the body was like not kosher with that, then they would have to find some other way, which I think is incredible. And it was developed from there. And so then if you think about the way that chiropractors work, kinesiologists then just decided, well, is there more than just the structure that could be a problem here? So we moved more into, could be biochemical, emotional, some trauma from the past. It could be some food that we're eating that's causing some type of trigger in the body. So, the best explanation I've ever had came from a Sparky, from an electrician who came in, and I'm explaining it to him, that we're going to go in and use this tool called muscle testing. We can muscle test any muscle in the body, and we put pressure on the muscle. Often when you go to a chiropractor, it can be a lot more pressure. from time to time now I do that technique where I use a bit more pressure so someone can really experience the change in their nervous system. But usually it's very light pressure. You'll be lying on the table, very comfortable. And as you know, because we've been through the process so many times, we just start to almost become detectives. So you might talk to me about what you're struggling with, or I'd like to improve this, or something's not quite right here, or I'm having this symptom. And we can put all those things into what we call like a circuit or a context, because there's so many we could talk about and think about. And then we just start to dive into, okay, well, what could possibly be associated to this particular issue over here? For example, I've had clients come in after a car accident, but it was many, many years prior. It might have been 20 or 30 years prior, and they've had a funny neck ever since. But it's been so long, they don't associate that trauma of that car accident with their issue. And sometimes the session will go down the line of actually transforming their association with a colour, because they've associated, say, for example, the car that hit them was red. And it's quite random. They won't remember that it's red until almost the last minute as we've unpacked and unpacked. And the mind, it takes snapshots of every moment of our life. And from then on, every time their subconscious experiences red, or, sees red around them, or someone's wearing red, they have a subconscious trigger that they didn't even know. They don't even know consciously happening. And that person, ended up with a rash. And they're like, I've tried it. I don't know what this rash is. And we use then various techniques. They could be eye mode related techniques where there's a lot of repetitive actions. There could be meridian tapping techniques. There could be even sometimes just realizing that there's a common connection between the two things. The body will start transforming it. And you just can't believe that a color, or the use of a color, or transforming their association with a color, would then have that rash go away. And it seems for some people that might seem very, a bit out there. But some of the things that I've seen on the table, even after one session, have just blown my mind around how that can transform. Now, how does that associate with the nervous system? Basically, your muscle, as we're putting pressure, will experience a loss of power. Not so much about, strength, but the nervous system will have like a brownout. And this Sparky said, so it's like when your whole house goes down and you have to go out to the little electrical box and flick it back on. And I was like, yeah, we're kind of doing that. I'm walking around, having a look. Okay, we're going to flick the box back on. But sometimes you go back in and you're not too sure which appliance it is, or which cord it is, but you use the hairdryer again and the whole house goes down. So ultimately, we're looking for the hairdryer, or we're looking
for that.
Right. So, and then once we work out, usually we go, oh, it's the hairdryer. Oh my God, it's the problem, with the hairdryer. It can't work anymore. It's tripping the system. So the system is completely fine, but there's something innately dysfunctional about that hairdryer. It's overheating or whatever's happening to it. And it's therefore causing a loss of power for the entire house, which is how the things in our lives can be experienced for people. So some trauma in our past, it's not even really necessarily connected to our present. Usually it's not. But something associated with it, a type of person, a type of food, a type of situation, a type of environment a lot of the time. And bang, it's like the house goes down. So we experience that loss of power in almost sometimes all areas of our lives. So once we work out where the hairdryer is, the hairdryer could be, an experience I had. Once we work that out, we balance out that person's experience in the nervous system, because all the nervous system is trying to do is protect you. It's like, oh my gosh, go through that again. So we go into fight, flight, or all those kinds of things. And so, that's really a very basic, we can go into a lot of neurological information about how it works, but really we're just trying to find those things that are tripping the system. Yeah.
It's like it's trying to find the root of the issue. And I guess for people that maybe aren't aware about how, like, not that I've read The Body Keeps a Score or that book, but a lot of people reference that about how any traumatic experiences or stuck emotions, stagnant energy gets stored in our body. I guess kinesiology helps you kind of excavate and get to the root of where, like, what is stuck. And when I've done a couple of other studies, I've looked at how we've obviously got our physical body, our mental body, our emotional, energetic, and spiritual body. Sometimes if there are things that are blocked energetically, or if there are things that are blocked mentally, emotionally from other experiences, it's almost like it can then transmute into our physical body to kind of get our attention. And I guess for people that are listening, is it always physical ailments that it shows up as? Or what are some other like ways that it gets? Because I know I haven't necessarily come to you because I've had sometimes I think there was one session where I had a sore knee and couldn't kind of attribute why, but it hasn't always been physical for me.
A lot of times it can be physical for people. For me, when I first came to kinesiologist, my first degree was in music. I was a professional flautist, and my dream was to become, the next Jane Rudder. If anyone knows who Jane Rudder was, she was a really famous flautist or flute player at that time. And because of the stress of performing, playing, sometimes 6-7 hours a day on that instrument, and sometimes very stressed, I had horrible RSI, and it was in those days it was surgery or don't play the instrument anymore. And then I had someone else say, you should see a kinesiologist. We're talking 98, 99, and to this day people still say, what's a kinesiologist? But then it was like, really, what the heck is that? And that was the start of my journey, that physical ailment, even though it related more so to a repetitive stress, a repetitive action. But the interesting thing about that repetitive action is if I played Telemann or Bach or Schumann, the pieces that you had to get right, and there was no leeway in expression. It's like that, not like that, otherwise it's wrong. I would get excruciating pain while I played. If I played folk or improvisation, where there was no container of how you could express yourself, I had no pain.
Wow.
So there's to me, not always, but it's interesting. Even to this day, I now play harp in palliative care wards. I never have RSI issues. But if I pick my flute up from time to time, I will, and I try and pick up Bach, or I pick up something, yes, they're difficult, but there's a different mindset with them.
Did kinesiology help you get to the root of where?
Yeah, and it was for me, it was the combination of extreme stress, because I had a lot of examinations at that time, ATMS, Australian Music Examination Board, just endless examination, and I was practicing under pressure and probably over pressure, but it was that combination of that anxiety around getting it wrong, the anxiety around getting it wrong, really, that connected to the body, and then the tension that would happen, and the rest is history. So yes, it can be physical, but there's generally some psychological, sometimes spiritual. Some people say, kinesiologists can go into all sorts of areas, people who deal with a lot of the spiritual side of things, but certainly there can be anxiety. People come in with anxiety, they don't know why, they're anxious. All that kind of thing. That's really common. Sometimes people just come in and they're frustrated, they're blocked, they're in a job that they're trying to expand, and they're like, I don't know why, I'm just hitting a ceiling, hitting myself that feels afraid, or there's something in I keep experiencing the same relationships, or something like that. And that's where we move into more of the incredible work that Bruce Lipton talks about with an environment and genetics and epigenetics, and the concept that if we can change the environment, not only externally but internally, change the environment internally, then we can start to change the experiences that we're having externally. So the patterns, the things that sometimes they're not just experiences, and this is not our poor old parents. So it seems to be that we're blaming them for everything, and not so much, but it's just the things that we've experienced from conception to birth, like the things that we've experienced even on a genetic level down the line. I have some people come in and they haven't had a particular experience, but their great-great-grandmother went through some part of the war and had a particular experience that is like in the genetic library for them. So for some people that can be a bit like, well, I don't know how that can possibly affect me, but if the genetics of if I can get the eye color of my grandmother, then I also have all of the resources and the experiences that she had in my nervous system.
So yeah, it's so interesting. It's so multi-layered. And I think it's just about
Mm.
it's being able to get to the root of your blocks, and that might be your physical blocks in your body, like if you've got an injury that you or a pain that you're not able to understand, like treat, I guess, traditionally, so to say. But it's also getting to the root of your mental blocks, your emotional blocks, and sometimes there can just be this overlap, like you can actually have an emotional block that's manifesting physically, or vice versa. So I see kinesiology as a fantastic modality to get to the root, and obviously it's not the only modality out there, but I think while I've always been drawn to kinesiology is because I mean, particularly in how you have worked it lately, it feels very collaborative. So it feels
Yes.
like I'm very involved
Yes.
in that kind of discovery process. But I
Yes.
also feel like, because for people that might struggle to connect with their body and who might be very um, mentally stimulated, which is myself, like I'm always in my head, very active, it just kind of helps, even as simple as like you putting pressure on my muscles to be able to test, it actually just helps me connect that little bit more to my body. Whereas if I was to go down, a therapy route, or even like NLP, which is still neural reprogramming, it's still very much in my headspace. Whereas I think it helps really create that connection between my mind and my body when I'm doing kinesiology.
Yeah. And circling back around to your comment about when things don't, the frustration of when things don't seem to go our way, or and then finding the creativity in that pathway that sort of didn't go where we thought. For me, getting RSI and pain in my wrist meant that I did need at that time to put my instrument down, and my instrument was like, it felt like a death. It was like this extension of my body and an extension of my creativity. Being on stage and playing flute was just like this rush and this thing that I wanted to spend the rest of my life doing. And when I felt that I couldn't do that, it felt like I died, or some part of myself died. But it wasn't until I had that session that something triggered off a curiosity, actually. It wasn't even like,
Yeah.
it was just and actually I've never stopped being curious, which is probably why I've just kept doing this. It's not like I dreamed as a child of being a therapist ever, like not once. Never. I wanted to be in entertainment, or a musician, or whatever. So in that industry, certainly I had no plans of that. So that curiosity had me, and it had me enough to wonder, how did I get almost 100% results? It wasn't gone after one session, but certainly after one session, it was 60 or 70% better. And I thought, how can that happen when all that woman did was press my arm and then hold a few points and do this? Like, what is that? And so that started that journey of curiosity, and the curiosity just kept having me do the next workshop, which would blow my mind about how people do their stuff and how the body connects and how incredible and how intelligent it is, and the brain and the nervous system and the meridian systems. And I would just keep getting more and more curious, to the point where I finished a whole practitioner certification in neuro-linguistic kinesiology. That was my first, which is the combination of neuro-linguistic programming and kinesiology. And I wake up one day, oh, okay, this is what I do now. And then people just came. Like, it's not like I even promoted. They just rocked up, and this is what I'm doing. And they kept coming. And it's 18, 19 years later, they just coming. And the curiosity didn't stop. So I went on to complete a whole certification in what they call neurotraining, which I loved. The father of neurotraining, Andrew Verity, this year sadly passed away, which was incredibly sad. But he was a person who came in with very much so the understanding of the nervous system, which I loved. He really wanted to dive into how the brain and the nervous system function inside the body. So that was incredible. Went through that certification, and then continued on to do a whole other certification in what we call Resolve, which is a lot looser. And I mean, obviously, to me, like, I think you really do need the structure of some other training before Resolve. That's my own humble opinion, but we've got 10 minutes, darling. So but for me, that huge turn, or that huge pivot meant that it set me off on this lifelong journey of being creative in a whole other way. And I love what you brought up about the whiteboard, because and the frustration around that becoming an opportunity to discover something about people having the opportunity to take part in the process. So normally with a kinesiologist, you would get on the table and I would muscle test, and I take notes, not because they're private or it's only for me to look, but just so that I can come back, reconnect with what I've written, check something, come back at a later date, all that kind of thing. Not like the person can't ask to see them. And one day, just out of necessity, I couldn't use my clinic. And luckily, Kirstene is one of those people that I was like, you know what, are you open to doing the whole session on this massive whiteboard? And you'll sit in front of it, and everything that I muscle test up, we'll put on the board. And then I'll give you a pen and I'll have a pen. And it was just incredible. What was your experience of doing the session in that way?
Before I answer, I do just want to I love how you just followed your curiosities. It sounds so simple, but it is like, that is the path. Like, and people always wonder, like, you know, what should I do? Or with like, what's my purpose? What should I do? Like, follow your curiosities and let it emerge. Like, there's no way you could have foreseen that. And I think there's a beauty in letting it unravel, because if you knew the whole path, then like, it's like you got spoilers for your whole life. So it's just like, follow the curiosities. And I think that's beautiful. But I absolutely love and I still see the creativity that was in you when you were playing 20 years ago. I know you still play now, but like, you're still bringing that creativity alive in how you do kinesiology. So creativity can be expressed in many forms. It's not just about the arts and music. It's about how can you do kinesiology in your own unique special way. So absolutely love that. But I think, particularly if I put my teacher hat on, people that are visual learners, I can see how the whiteboard, and I'm a visual learner, seeing it map out, even if it's just words, but then seeing how different words can connect. Like, I think the most powerful thing about the whiteboard was like, becomes this almost like spider web of, I feel like it was like, the way I would describe it, if I show people a picture of what the whiteboard looked like at the end of our session, I'm like, this is my subconscious, like, this is this is it. And it just helps you be able to make because I mean, kinesiology is all about you unraveling things and making connections. Like, if you look at the root cause of your block or your problem, it's connected in some way to what is in your reality right now. So the whiteboard and seeing the web of connections is literally like a visual representation of that. So I think for a visual learner, it's amazing. But I think even if you're not a visual learner, it's just a way for you to really collaborate in that process. And you can start to have those aha moments and make those connections. So I found it so incredibly powerful. And I'm like, I don't know if I could go back now. I think I
know. I'm thinking I really need to. My great plan is to have my clinic set up with one whole wall as a whiteboard surface, so that sometimes there are some people who love to be on the table and to be nurtured, and that is part of the journey too. And there are some days people come here, I just don't want to think it through. I just want to get on the table and let the process happen and feel that nurturing, which is beautiful. And the last, having people like yourself who are really open to, do you want to try something? Like, yes, I do. I'm open. And for us both to sit in front of this, we're kind of just sitting like Forrest Gump in front of this on his, on his park bench. And, you'd look and you'd see how these 2 or 3 particular words would just connect. Like, you'd almost draw a line to them over and over again, but you couldn't see that before. And for some people, I think, to see this aspect of their life in front of them, it can be quite confronting.
Yeah, and I think it allows your intuition to almost speak up though, and be like, because there would be moments where we're looking at it and I'm like, I don't know what the next step is, but then I might get an intuitive hit, or you might get an intuitive hit and be like, I wonder if that is connected there. So I just think it really gives the space for your intuition to really step in, particularly if you're going in all different directions, which is often the case. But yeah, I just from a visual aspect, being able to see, like, connect the dots, because this is all about connecting the dots.
Connecting the dots.
And it's just a fantastic tool for being able to, or fantastic approach to kinesiology to support with connecting those dots.
That's right. We still use
And
muscle testing. We still do processes once we're done.
well, I think the second time we did it, you muscle tested something at the start, and I came in like wanting to focus on something, and then when you muscle tested, like, trust came up, and that wasn't at all connected to initially what we could see,
Yes.
what I was coming in for.
Yes.
And after we went through the whole cycle, we looked back at that word trust, and we're like, it is connected. So you're still starting and weaving in those integral pieces of kinesiology in there. It's just this is an added layer that supports with making those connections.
That's right. And it helps, I think, on some level. What I've noticed in people as they do it on, with the blackboard, it creates more of that personal responsibility to be a part of the process of seeing it. Because often as we get really good as kinesiologists, we get really good at seeing the dots. I can often see something. I've got to try not to do that, because at times, you think you don't want to apply yourself to people's stuff, but often you can see patterns over many years. You do see patterns with people, and so already you'll start to see this stuff emerging. And the person, because it's their stuff and it's quite unconscious, they're quite clueless to how it's all connecting. And often the brain works in that way that it doesn't really want you to necessarily know how it's connecting, because that's the safety mechanism of keeping you safe, really. Even though people get frustrated with themselves or their patterns, the one thing that I've learned as a kinesiologist over all this time, and seeing all these patterns and experiences of all, I've heard it all, every story you could imagine, good, bad, and ugly, is that we're all human. We all make choices that impact us in different ways, and other people make choices that also impact us, though ultimately your nervous system and your entire body is always trying to help you. Like it's actually, even though the anxiety might not feel like that, it's actually trying to protect you from something it perceives as being dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's then working through, allowing the body to work through and repaint what it perceives as dangerous. It's like to not be dangerous anymore, or to be less dangerous, and the possibility that you can try this new thing or whatever it is. So we've only got a couple of minutes left, and I'm actually thinking to myself, it might be, if you're open, it might be really interesting. So we've sort of given everyone a little bit of a taste of, bits and pieces of conversation about how kinesiology can work and how it can work from other people. It might be nice at some time, when I have my blackboard up and running, to actually do a session, and like, not live necessarily, could just record the session and allow people to see the process. Because for you and I to try and even explain how that process unfolds, from writing one word on the board, muscle testing through, getting feedback from your body, and then to this massive aha, and then almost like a domino effect of ahas back, where at the very beginning it's like, I can't see how that could possibly connect to that. And next thing we realize, like, this domino that goes not in a line, but like in a circular, like it almost seems like, water going out is the visualization I get of realizing that this thing that's, holding us back possibly, is we're doing it everywhere, not just this one spot, but it's
showing up.
It's everywhere, and we just didn't see it there and there and there.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be more than happy to do that. And I think two things to quickly say before we get cut off is that you create such a safe space for us to do the diving. Like, I think it could be extremely confronting for a lot of people to see their subconscious out in front of them. But like, it's actually fun for me, because in order for it to be fun, is I have to feel very safe and comfortable around you. So that's where an absolute credit is. And I think you can see the patterns, and that's part of, why people are working with you, because you can see the patterns. But when you can help people see the patterns for themselves, that's when the real transformation is. So I think it's just, it's a credit to you, a credit to how you are innovating this space. And it's super powerful. So
I think we need to do a part B. Let's do that.
I know. I think so.